Hi guys, welcome to my video where I'm going to go through all the different parts of the ear and what each one does. So this is the diagram that you guys have in your notes. So I'm going to go through and label the diagram. The headings on the top are breaking the ear into three different portions. So we have the outer ear, which is made up of the outside part of our ear that is fleshy, made of cartilage, called the pinna, which is basically going to capture the sound and send it into our auditory canal. Okay, you might call it the ear canal. This is kind of just the fancier version of that, the auditory canal. And then we have the tympanic membrane, which you might have called it the eardrum. Okay, that's going to vibrate and eventually send those vibrations into our inner ear. So tympanic membrane is kind of the fancier name for eardrum. So once we move past the eardrum into this area right here, we call that the middle ear. Okay, so we have three different bones in our middle ear. Okay, they're the smallest bones found in our body. They're called the malleus, the incus, or the stapes, or the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. But we just need to know that they're called the ossicles, the small bones. You don't actually have to know the individual names of them. So I'll never ask you to differentiate between the three of those. So another couple of things that we have in the middle ear, we have the oval window, which is where the very last ossicle strikes. Okay, after it takes the vibrations, it will strike this little, almost like a miniature eardrum to amplify the vibrations from the outside of the ear. And then we also have right here, this little circle right here is called the round window. And then this tube, which connects to our throat, is called the Eustachian tube, which we use to equalize the air pressure between our middle ear so that our eardrums don't rupture. So now we're going to be moving on to our inner ear, which includes our cochlea, which is this snail shell looking structure, which is involved in our hearing. Okay, there's little tiny hairs inside of here that take the vibrations from the oval window and they'll actually make them move, which will eventually send an impulse to the auditory nerve, which is connected to our temporal lobe of our brain. We also have the semicircular canals, which are controlling our balance. And right at the base of our semicircular canals, you also have something called the vestibule, which is also involved in our balance. So these two things will send impulses to our different part of our brain, which controls our balance and posture. So these are all of our parts of the ear that you should know really, really, really well. And now moving into the table that breaks down the parts, so you have to write the function of each part. Okay, we're starting in the outer ear, talking about the pinna and the auditory canal. So the pinna is that external flap. It collects sounds, it directs the sounds to our auditory canal. Our auditory canal is going to carry the sound to the eardrum, okay, which we call the tympanic membrane, and it's also going to amplify the sound, making the sound a little bit louder. So when it strikes the tympanic membrane, it's going to actually be able to be heard eventually in our inner ear. So the auditory canal is right here. And just so you guys know, the reason that we get earwax on the auditory canal, it is to protect our ears from invading particles like dust or dirt, okay, or bacteria. And it comes from the sweat glands. They're specialized sweat glands that produce earwax instead of just sweat. So now looking at the eardrum or the tympanic membrane, it's what separates the outer and the middle ear. And if you perforate it or cause it to rupture or break in any way, it can lead to hearing loss. Because if you don't have the eardrum to vibrate the ossicles, okay, obviously the ossicles aren't going to vibrate. It's not going to send the impulse to the cochlea, and then nothing's going to be sent to the brain. So this is what the eardrum actually looks like when the doctor sticks that little light thing in your ear. That's what they're going to be able to see, is this right at the end of your auditory canal. So we also have the ossicles. When we move into the middle ear, remember that it's air filled. It shouldn't be fluid filled. The only time it's ever fluid filled is if you have a really, really bad ear infection, and that can impede your hearing. It can sound like muffled because your ossicles aren't going to be able to vibrate like they should. They are basically there to amplify sound so that eventually when it gets to the cochlea, they're really, really loud vibrations. It's actually amazing how good they are at amplifying. In fact, engineers have tried to kind of remake them in real life to amplify, and they've never been able to recreate them as well as they are in real life. So it's pretty awesome. Again, there's 3 of them. You don't need to know the 3 different names, just in case you're wondering, because you've been given the names hammer, anvil, and stirrup, and you're like, what are those? We just need to know that they're called the Ossicles for Bio 30. So moving into the ossicles, at the very end, when we get to the stapes, it's going to strike the oval window, which is basically the very start of the cochlea. It's like a little miniature drum. So basically at the very end, the last ossicle is going to strike a little drum, which is going to cause our little vibrations to go into the cochlea, and we can start to interpret that as a sound. On the other side of the cochlea, so if you guys see this here, this is the oval window, the stapes strikes that. The sound goes into this structure, and then the fluid, basically the ripples in the fluid are going to hit the round window just to basically equalize the pressure so that we can have the fluid basically moving within them. So it just basically allows that movement of fluid in the cochlea so that the inner ear hairs can actually be used for hearing. If there was nothing to basically equalize that pressure within it, it wouldn't be able to move, and we wouldn't be able to have any movements on the inner ear hairs, which are our sensory receptors inside the ear, which we use for hearing. So now moving to the Eustachian tube, which has no function for hearing whatsoever. It's literally just connecting our throat to our middle ear, and it's there to equalize pressure. Okay, if we end up with fluid inside the Eustachian tube, we can have really poor hearing or balance, and this is what causes us to be able to have our ears pop on a plane, or if you're going really, really down deep into the water, like scuba diving, or maybe you want to touch the bottom of the pool in the swimming pool, okay, you can pop your ears. That's what we use to pop our ears. So just equalizing the pressure so our eardrums don't rupture, because obviously that would be bad, because then we wouldn't be able to hear anything. So now we're moving to the structures that are in the inner ear, which include the semicircular canal. So this is one of the semicircular canals. There are actually 3 of them that kind of go in different orientations. So it is fluid filled. This tube is fluid filled. So at the very end of them, there's something called the cupula. And when fluid fills this structure and pushes against it, the cupula is going to move, and it's going to give our brain information about if we're spinning. These hair cells that are inside the cupula are going to, if they move, send an impulse to our brain. We're going to learn this process when we go through equilibrium, which is going to be in a couple of videos. And then we have the base of the semicircular canals, where we have the vestibule, which is also connected to the oval window to the middle ear. We have 2 important things, the utricle and the saccule. Okay, and this is what gives us information about head position, which is just moving our head towards our ear, or maybe forward or backwards. Okay, we have these things called ear stones, which are actually called otoliths, which are embedded in a membrane and slide in response to linear movement. So basically our head going up or down. So again, we're going to get into this process when we get to talking about how we control our balance and posture, but we'll do that in a couple of videos. For now, just remember that both the vestibule and the semicircular canals are something to do with balance. And then moving into the only structure that we have in the inner ear that controls our hearing. So we have little hair cells inside what we call the basilar membrane that take the sound waves that are vibrations and convert them into nerve impulses that are eventually sent to our brain. So important to differentiate between the cochlea and the vestibule and semicircular canals, because the cochlea, which looks like a snail shell, is the only one that controls hearing. And that is the end of the functions of the structures of the inner ear. So make sure you guys remember those really, really, really well, because they obviously will be tested on your guys' chapter exam. For the drawing quiz, you only need to know the structures to label. I'll give you an ear diagram that you have to label for me. So have a wonderful evening. Hopefully this made sense. I'll see you guys in class tomorrow, and have a good night.